Aquarius, what if the life you keep trying to return to no longer exists because your soul has already moved beyond it? August 2nd carries a powerful message for Aquarius. The moon may be closing an invisible chapter, releasing an old identity, and guiding you toward a version of yourself you have not fully met yet. What feels unfamiliar may actually be your spiritual shift beginning. Aquarius, have you noticed that you can remember the past but no longer feel at home inside it? There is a particular kind of quiet that settles in when something inside you has already changed, even though nothing on the outside looks different yet. You wake up, and the room looks the same. The people in your life are still there. The routines still repeat themselves in the same order they always have, and yet something feels off, in a way you cannot quite explain to anyone, maybe not even to yourself. You look at a photo from a year ago, or you think about a version of your life you used to want so badly, and instead of comfort, you feel distance. Not sadness exactly, not confusion either, just distance, like looking at a house you used to live in from the outside, noticing the porch light is still on, but knowing you no longer have a key. This is one of the strangest parts of growth, Aquarius. It rarely begins with a dramatic event. It begins quietly, almost invisibly, in the space between who you were and who you are becoming. You may find yourself less interested in conversations that once excited you. You may scroll past dreams you used to chase without feeling the same pull. You may sit with old friends and realize the connection feels different, not because anyone did anything wrong, but because you have shifted in a way words have not caught up with yet. If this sounds familiar, please hear this clearly. You are not broken and you are not failing at your own life. What you are experiencing is an inner transition, not a personal crisis. Aquarius, your mind often processes change intellectually long before your heart catches up emotionally. You are the sign that can see 5 steps ahead, that can sense a shift in the wind before anyone else notices the sky has changed colour. So it makes sense that you would feel this movement internally first, quietly, privately, before your life on the outside has any reason to look different at all. Sometimes the old timeline fades not because something tragic happened, but simply because you already learned what it came to teach you. A friendship taught you what loyalty really feels like or what it does not feel like. A job taught you your worth beyond your usefulness. A relationship taught you the difference between being needed and being chosen. Once the lesson has been absorbed into who you are, the chapter naturally starts to lose its grip, even if you have not consciously said goodbye to it yet. You might have caught yourself scrolling through old messages, wondering why the excitement you once felt reading them has quietly disappeared. Or maybe you have driven past a place that used to mean something to you, and instead of nostalgia, you felt nothing at all, and that emptiness surprised you more than sadness ever could. This is not indifference, Aquarius, even though it can feel unsettling to name it. It is your emotional world updating itself in real time, releasing its grip on what it has already processed and understood. There is also a version of this experience that shows up as restlessness rather than stillness. You might feel an urge to change something, anything, even if you cannot say exactly what needs to shift. A sudden pull to rearrange your space, change your routine, cut back on commitments, or distance yourself from conversations that once felt effortless. This restlessness is not randomness. It is often the outer echo of an inner realignment that has already been happening beneath the surface for longer than you realized. This emotional distance you may be feeling, Aquarius, is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a sign that something inside you has already outgrown its old container, and the moon may be revealing why this emotional distance is becoming impossible to ignore. This is a good moment to pause and simply breathe, Aquarius, because what comes next may explain a great deal about the emotional weather you have been moving through lately. In astrology, the moon has always represented something deeper than the sky. It represents the unseen part of you, the emotional undercurrent running beneath your logical, clever, forward-thinking Aquarius mind. The moon governs memory, intuition, subconscious patterns, and the emotions you carry even when you are not actively thinking about them. When the moon becomes active in your chart, it does not usually announce itself loudly. It works quietly, stirring what has been sitting beneath the surface, asking you to notice what you have been avoiding, remembering, or holding without realizing it. This is why, around this time, you may notice old memories surfacing unexpectedly. A conversation from months ago replays in your mind while you are doing something as simple as making coffee or driving home. A person you have not thought about in a long time appears in a dream. An old ambition, one you told yourself you had let go of, quietly resurfaces and asks whether you truly released it or simply buried it beneath busyness. Here is something important to understand, Aquarius. The return of an old emotion does not always mean you are meant to return to the old situation. Sometimes an emotion resurfaces not as an invitation to go back, but as an invitation to finally understand it. The moon may be bringing these feelings forward not to trap you in the past, but to give you one more honest look at it, so that you can release it consciously instead of carrying it unconsciously. There is a difference between remembering something and being ruled by it. What is surfacing now may simply be asking for acknowledgement, not repetition. You might also notice this shift in smaller, quieter ways, like feeling unusually emotional during a moment that would not normally affect you, or feeling strangely at peace during a moment that once would have overwhelmed you. These fluctuations are not signs of instability. They are signs that your emotional landscape is being reorganized, that old feelings are settling into new places, making room for a different kind of clarity than the one you have been used to. It can also help to remember that the moon moves through cycles for a reason. Nothing in your emotional world is meant to stay in one phase forever, no matter how permanent certain feelings once seemed. Just as the moon waxes and wanes without ever disappearing completely, your own emotional chapters rise, peak, and fade in their own time. What feels unbearably present today may feel like a distant memory in a matter of weeks, not because you forced it away, but because emotional tides naturally move when you allow them to. Some chapters end with a clear, dramatic goodbye, a final conversation, a visible ending everyone can point to, but many of the most important endings in life are quiet ones. They do not come with closure in the traditional sense. They come with a slow fading, an emotional distance that grows until one day you realize the chapter has already ended, even though no one said the final words out loud. If this describes something in your life right now, Aquarius, know that the absence of a dramatic ending does not make the ending any less real or any less valid. But Aquarius, the deepest release may not be a person, place, or memory. It may be the old role you learned to play. For much of your life, Aquarius, you may have quietly taken on a role without fully choosing it. Perhaps you became the one who always stayed strong, even when no one checked whether you were actually okay. Perhaps you became the one who understood everyone else's feelings so well that your own feelings rarely got the same attention. Perhaps you learned, somewhere along the way, that asking for help felt riskier than simply carrying the weight alone. You became skilled at appearing composed, rational, and unaffected, even in moments when you were quietly overwhelmed. This is one of the most tender truths about your sign. Aquarius is often seen as detached, independent, endlessly self-sufficient. But underneath that image is often someone who cares more deeply than they let on. Someone who learned early that emotional independence felt safer than emotional vulnerability. Somewhere along the way, staying unaffected became a form of protection. And for a while it worked. It kept you steady when things around you were chaotic. It let you function when others fell apart. But protection that goes on for too long can quietly turn into isolation, even when you are surrounded by people who care about you. You may be releasing that identity now, Aquarius, the version of yourself who learned to survive by appearing unaffected. This does not mean you are becoming someone fragile or dependent. It means you are becoming someone who can hold both strength and softness at the same time. The new version of you does not have to choose between protecting your peace and staying open to real connection. You can set boundaries and still let people in. You can be independent and still allow yourself to be supported. This is not a contradiction. This is maturity. You are not losing yourself, Aquarius. You are releasing the version of yourself that was built only to survive. This shift often shows up in small, almost unnoticeable moments. Maybe you catch yourself pausing before automatically saying you are fine, actually checking in with how you feel before answering. Maybe you find yourself telling someone the truth about your capacity instead of quietly overextending yourself the way you always have. Maybe you allow a conversation to end without smoothing over every uncomfortable silence, trusting that not every gap needs to be filled by your effort. These moments may feel small, but they are often the clearest evidence that the old identity is loosening its hold. It is worth acknowledging that this kind of release can feel disorienting before it feels freeing. The old identity, however exhausting it may have been, was familiar. It gave you a role to play, a way of being useful, a sense of predictability in how others saw you and how you saw yourself. Letting that go, even when it no longer serves you, can create a strange kind of grief, a mourning for a version of yourself you are not fully sad to lose, but still spent a long time being. Give yourself permission to feel that complexity without rushing past it. Growth often requires more than changing your circumstances. Sometimes it requires changing the way you see yourself entirely, releasing the identity that got you through difficult seasons, so that a more honest, more whole version of you has room to exist. And once this old identity begins to dissolve, unusual signs may start appearing. Let's talk about 7 quiet signs that your spiritual shift may already be underway, Aquarius. See how many of these feel familiar to you. Some of them may seem small on their own, almost too ordinary to mean anything significant, but together they often paint a much clearer picture than any single sign could on its own. So pay attention not just to whether one resonates, but to how many of them do. The first sign is that you feel less interested in proving yourself. Where you once felt the need to explain your choices, justify your feelings, or prove your worth to people who questioned it, you may now feel a growing indifference to that pressure. This is not coldness. It is your energy moving away from external validation and settling into inner peace instead. The second sign is that old conversations replay in your mind, but they no longer control your emotions the way they used to. You might remember an argument, a rejection, or a painful moment, and notice that while the memory is still there, the emotional charge around it has softened. This often means you are processing the past from a stronger, steadier emotional position than you were in when it originally happened. The third sign is that you suddenly crave more quiet and personal space. Maybe you find yourself wanting fewer social obligations, more time alone with your thoughts, more moments of stillness. This is not withdrawal for its own sake. Your inner world may simply be asking for the reflection and emotional clarity that constant noise and busyness have made difficult to access. The fourth sign is that some relationships feel different without an obvious reason. A friendship that once felt easy might now feel slightly effortful. A connection that once felt distant might now feel unexpectedly meaningful. This shift often reflects changes happening in your own values, boundaries, or emotional needs, changes that naturally reshape which relationships feel aligned and which no longer do. The fifth sign is that you feel drawn to simplify your life. Fewer commitments, fewer possessions weighing you down, fewer situations that drain more than they give. This urge to simplify is often your inner self creating space for what feels more meaningful and more aligned with who you are becoming. The sixth sign is that your intuition feels stronger than usual. You may find yourself sensing things before they are said out loud, noticing patterns you overlooked before, trusting a quiet inner knowing that seems clearer than it has in a long time. This heightened intuition often reflects your ability to notice truths that were previously hidden beneath routine, distraction, or emotional noise. And the seventh sign is that you feel both uncertain and hopeful at the same time. This particular combination can be confusing because uncertainty and hope do not usually feel like they belong together, but in a genuine spiritual shift, they often arrive as a pair. Part of you is releasing what is familiar, and another part of you is beginning to sense new possibilities forming, even if you cannot see their shape yet. If several of these signs feel familiar, Aquarius, the next message may explain what this shift is preparing you for. Let's talk honestly about why the future might feel unclear right now, because this uncertainty may be one of the more uncomfortable parts of everything we have discussed so far. If you are releasing an old identity, an old role, an old emotional pattern, it makes sense that the path ahead would feel a little foggy. You are no longer making choices from the person you used to be, but you have not yet fully stepped into the person you are becoming. That in-between space can feel disorienting, even a little lonely. This is the space between releasing an old chapter and recognizing a new direction. It is not empty. It is not wasted time. It is simply unfamiliar because you have not lived here before. Not every transformation arrives with immediate answers about what comes next. Sometimes the answers reveal themselves slowly, through small shifts you might not even notice at first. A change in what you value, a change in how much energy certain situations require from you, a change in where you draw your boundaries, a change in what actually matters to you now compared to a year ago. Instead of searching for the entire new path all at once, Aquarius, try paying attention to these smaller changes. They are often the clearest signals of where your life is heading, even before the bigger picture becomes visible. Uncertainty in this context is not the absence of direction. It is an open space where new choices are still forming, still taking shape, not yet solidified into something you can name. There is another layer to this uncertainty worth naming, Aquarius. Your mind is naturally drawn to logic, patterns, and clear answers. You like to understand things, to map them out, to have some sense of where a situation is heading. So when life refuses to hand you that clarity right away, it can feel especially frustrating, even destabilizing. But some seasons are not meant to be figured out intellectually before they are lived through emotionally. Some answers only reveal themselves after you have already taken a few steps forward, not before. If you find yourself wanting to force a decision just to escape the discomfort of not knowing, consider giving yourself a little more time instead. Not every unclear moment needs to be resolved immediately. Some of the most meaningful new directions in life reveal themselves slowly through a series of small, almost unremarkable choices rather than one single defining moment of clarity. Trust that the fog you are standing in now is not permanent. It is simply the space your new path is quietly forming inside of, even before you can see its outline. You do not have to know the entire path. You only need to recognize what no longer feels true. There is a certain kind of courage required to sit inside not knowing, especially for a mind like yours that finds comfort in understanding. But this in-between space is not a punishment or a mistake. It is simply part of the process, the quiet middle ground every real transformation has to pass through before it fully arrives. Now let's gently look at the soul lesson hidden inside the old timeline, because every chapter that ends, even quietly, usually leaves something behind worth honoring. The past may have taught you about boundaries, about what happens when you give too much without receiving enough in return. It may have taught you about self-worth, about recognizing your own value even when others were slow to see it. It may have taught you about trust, about patience, about emotional honesty, or about a kind of resilience you did not know you had until you were forced to find it. Whatever the lesson was for you, Aquarius, it deserves acknowledgement rather than avoidance. You do not need to relive the pain to honor what it taught you. There is a real difference between remembering the past and continuing to live inside it. Remembering allows you to carry the wisdom forward while leaving the weight behind. Living inside it means the lesson has finished, but you are still standing in the same room, waiting for something that has already happened to become something different than it was. Forgiveness, if that word applies to your situation, does not always require reconnecting with the person or circumstance involved. Sometimes forgiveness is entirely internal, a private decision to stop carrying resentment that no longer serves you, regardless of whether the other side ever acknowledges what happened. Closure, too, can be an internal decision. You do not always need someone else's explanation, apology, or final conversation to close a chapter for yourself. Sometimes you simply decide, quietly and firmly, that the chapter is finished, and you begin living as though that decision is true. Take a moment, if you can, to sit with a few questions. What have you been carrying after its purpose was already complete? Which old version of yourself are you ready to thank and release? And what would change if you stopped waiting for the past to become different than it already was? You might notice, as you sit with these questions, that the answers do not come with dramatic clarity. They come quietly, almost like a whisper you have to slow down to hear. That is normal. The soul rarely announces its lessons loudly. It tends to reveal them gradually, through a growing sense of ease around something that used to feel heavy, or a subtle shift in how you respond to a situation that once would have triggered an old wound. Notice those small shifts. They are proof that the lesson has already been learned, even if you have not consciously named it until now. If it helps, you might hold this simple affirmation close. I honor what I have experienced, release what has completed its purpose, and trust the person I am becoming. Now, Aquarius, let's talk about what you are being guided to welcome as this new chapter begins to take shape. You are being invited to welcome emotional clarity instead of emotional confusion, a sense of knowing what you feel and why, instead of constantly untangling mixed signals from your own heart. You are being invited to welcome relationships that respect you without requiring constant explanation. Connections where you do not have to justify your boundaries, your feelings, or your need for space simply to be understood. You are being invited to welcome new opportunities that match your current values, rather than opportunities that only made sense to the person you used to be. What excited you 2 years ago may not excite you now, and that is not inconsistency. That is growth doing exactly what it is supposed to do. You are being invited to welcome a calmer, more authentic way of living, one where you no longer have to perform composure you do not feel or minimize needs you actually have. This means choosing alignment over familiarity, even when familiarity feels safer simply because you know it well. It can be tempting to return to what is comfortable, even when it no longer fits, simply because comfort feels less frightening than the unknown. But Aquarius, familiarity was never meant to be the standard you measure your life against. Alignment is a quieter, steadier feeling, one that does not always announce itself with excitement, but with a sense of rightness that settles in your chest when a choice truly fits who you are now. The spiritual shift you are moving through is not usually a single dramatic awakening. It is a gradual one, becoming visible slowly through the everyday choices you make, the boundaries you finally set, the conversations you no longer force yourself into, the peace you start protecting instead of postponing. You may not notice the full transformation until you look back, months from now, and realize how differently you are moving through your days compared to who you were at the start of this chapter. The new timeline may not begin with a dramatic event. It may begin with one quiet decision. I will no longer abandon myself to remain connected to what I have outgrown. As we come to the end of this reading, Aquarius, here is the final message the moon seems to be offering you. That unfamiliar feeling you have been sitting with, the sense that something inside you no longer matches the life you used to know, may actually be evidence of real inner growth rather than something to fear or fix. You do not need to chase after what is naturally moving away from you. Some things fade not because you failed to hold on to them, but because you have already grown beyond what they were able to offer. Trust the lessons you have already learned. They were not wasted, even the painful ones. They shaped the clarity you now carry, whether you fully recognize that yet or not. As this new chapter continues to unfold, allow yourself to feel hope alongside the uncertainty, and allow yourself a quiet kind of confidence, even before you have all the answers. There is no need to rush this process, Aquarius, and there is no need to prove to anyone, including yourself, that you have already figured everything out. Some of the most powerful transformations happen slowly, almost invisibly, revealing themselves only when you look back and notice how far you have actually come. Give yourself the same patience you have so often given others. You deserve it just as much as anyone you have ever supported. Aquarius, the old timeline is not disappearing to leave you empty. It may be making room for a life that reflects your truth more clearly. You are not being asked to become someone else. You are being invited to return to the part of yourself that no longer needs to hide, prove, or carry everything alone. Aquarius, if this message reached you at the right moment, comment below. I release the old timeline and welcome my true path. Your comment may be the first conscious step into this new chapter. If this reading resonated with you, like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more Aquarius guidance. And remember, sometimes your spiritual shift does not begin when everything changes around you. It begins when you finally realize that you have changed within.